When our fourth form cricket team played Birkenhead Club in early 1996, Gary was on the lookout for winter recruits. The Silverdale Rugby Club captain had an eye for athletic talent. Umpiring at Tom's end, Gary took note of the teen's delivery. He had no more than a 5-pace run-up. Without stretching or warming his muscles, he bowled the ball with perfect line and length, bogging the batsman down throughout the innings. As a result, Birkenhead were unable to reach our score. "That Tom's a good bowler, James," Gary said at the end of the game. "Does he play rugby?" "He's not hard enough for rugby. Exceptional soccer player though, one of the best in the college. Would make a great first 5/8 if he tried. With guidance, people like him can play anywhere," said Gary, pulling pen and paper from his pocket, noting Tom's full name. In physical education class, the athlete moaned about forced warm-ups and compulsory group exercises, smelling of cigarettes smoked at the interval. His favourite pastime was to do nothing. Scheduled to perform the beep test, Tom had forgotten his shorts and partook in thick cotton track pants. Playing second 15 rugby and jogging with my dog Jasper a couple of times a week, I intended to make a high grade, reluctantly withdrawing at level 11-7. Other participants gradually dropped out. Tom was the last student left and finished top at level 17-1. The 15-year-old contended with a few German exchange students to be the best football player in the first 11. At over 6 feet tall, he was also a competent basketball player. In our fifth form science class, we conducted an experiment involving the alkali metal lithium. At period's end, the sweating first-year teacher, Mr. Bennett, slipped his fingers through the strap of my backpack. "James, the lithium has gone. Have you got the lithium?" "No." "Okay." I was pulled from geography class the next lesson by the head of science, Mr. Hume, who interrogated Tom and me. "We know you took the lithium, James. Where is it?" "You know nothing, for I didn't take it." "Tell us where it is." The to and fro of accusation and denial continued for an hour. "All right, I confess," Tom said. "I took the lithium." "Where is it?" "I got a friend to hide it in a tree." Tom looked over to me. "I'm sorry, James." "You're not the one who should be apologizing." I directed my gaze to Mr. Hume. He wrote a note of explanation for the teacher of my fifth period class. Lunchtime had come and gone. "Get back to where you should be," Hume said as I snatched the paper from his hand. Tom received the suspension. He and I were similar in many ways. We were both reasonably intelligent and with stronger application could have performed well at our studies. Our older brothers were popular with girls who showed no interest in us, scraggly and uncouth. Tom left school not long after his suspension. I still saw him as we worked at the same supermarket. However, socially we remained distant. In the late 80s, as a child back in Manchester, Tom was sent by his father to the corner shop to pick up cigars. For reward, he was allowed to buy himself a 0.5% shandy bass. At one of his parents' parties, he took a glass of brandy from a low table and sculled it, making him puke. When the family moved to New Zealand, Tom's old man taught him to assist with brewing beer at home. The pantry was filled with cask wines, brandy, and whiskey, indicating to the adolescent it was a man's rite of passage to drink and be merry. Tom traded a Penthouse magazine for a bottle of Captain Morgan dark rum, pinched from his friend's parents' liquor cabinet. Sharing the bottle between 4, his fellow novice drinkers coughed and spat, retiring early, but Tom felt no effect. Swigs came at shorter intervals and higher volumes. Within 20 minutes, he was slipping in and out of consciousness. It rained, and the incapable teen tried to slither through grass to a tree he believed would support him getting back to his feet. Two boys taunted him with laughter. The other youth's father arrived to pick his son up. They hoisted Tom into the back seat of the family car. Waking in mud and urine-soaked clothes, the axe in his head was not enough to null his desire to get smashed again without delay. In our town, Orewa, groups of the bored and misguided would seek out targets for gangbashing, those alone, awkward, and intoxicated. At a rave in nearby Silverdale, Tom drank hard spirits and lost himself in a mosh pit, a performance of foolish antics. He swayed his arms without care for knocking those nearby. One party-goer gave Tom a slight clout to the head as a warning his behaviour was not wanted. "You should leave." "Fuck off." The hammered teen found himself alone on the side of the road at party's end, separated from his peers. Without provocation, a guy pushed Tom and another hooked him from behind with a closed fist. A third joined in, and they battered him with a flurry of punches, forcing him to the ground, stomping and kicking his face and torso. "Get off him! Leave him alone!" some girls screamed, pressuring the attackers to withdraw. At sunrise, Tom bandaged and iced his cut and swollen face, unable to work out if his horrific headache was from the beating or the booze. "What happened, Tom?" his mother asked. "You wouldn't believe it. The mosh pit was so wild that I hit my head and fell. People didn't see me on the ground." Does she believe me? Tom and I lost touch when he moved back to the United Kingdom. At 17, due to a clerical error, he was illegally employed as an underage server at the Water's Edge in West London, where he'd drink most nights. On his 18th birthday, Tom and his co-worker Hibiscus broke into a swimming club on the western edge of the Thames River. While attempting to steal a paddle boat, they were surrounded by police officers, forced against a wire fence, frisked, handcuffed, and transported to a police station by van. There, they were fingerprinted in old-fashioned ink and had mud shots taken. Finally, they were interviewed and incarcerated. "Hey, Haggis," Tom slurred from his cell, his eyes to the guard facing the opposite direction. "I spy with my little eye something beginning with B. Bars? No. Bums? No. Bacon? Yes." "Fucking shut it!" screamed an inmate from his cell. "Fucking mugs, shut it." "I spy with my little eye something beginning with M. Mess? Yes." Enduring oppressive heat, dehydrated and claustrophobic, the pair was released early next morning. The following weekend, Hibiscus and Tom sipped their way through rounds of vodka and Red Bull, the caffeine masking the alcohol effect in their search for chaos. "They're cooking cat," the men screamed at customers after entering a high-street Chinese restaurant prior to being chased out by a cursing meat cleaver-wielding chef. They entered a bakery and stole some bread. The pair executed flying kicks against a video store, but were halted by the yelling of a nearby resident before they could shatter the glass. This didn't prevent them running down the road and upturning rubbish bins, fighting each other with the decomposing filthy matter. On an empty Sunday night in their pub, Tom sat with his co-worker, Steve. The duo drank and chatted with a bartender. "Can you lads keep watch? Gotta tap a keg." "Sure, pal." Tom slipped behind the counter and filled a pint glass with varied spirits. Straws were placed into the vessel and contents consumed. The bartender returned and, baffled by their intense behavioral change, requested the doorman politely eject the pair. Oblivious to how he got there, Tom found himself in his bed after waking from a crash. Steve was ransacking the room, tearing down the curtains. He raised his forearm, exposing a bracelet. "I've come from the hospital, and you're fired." As it happened, Tom had caught a taxi home. Meanwhile, Steve passed out on the road before being transported by ambulance to a hospital ward. The manager phoned Steve to say a backpack had been left in the bar, exposing a bottle of Bailey's which Tom had taken, leading to dismissal and eviction from the company-owned flat. Tom returned to New Zealand and got a job at a cafe in Takapuna, 30 kilometres south of Orewa. Drinking didn't slow, and he slouched into work hungover, coming in 2 hours late one morning to find a chef tearing hair from her head. The red-faced owner stormed into the kitchen. "I serve Korean Army. You need discipline. You fire." His wife had sympathy for Tom's illness and gave $100 to the now unemployed man. Tom found work at an Irish pub. The intense New Zealand sun can be harsh on the darkest of skin, and Tom's pale exterior sizzled one New Year's Eve when he fell asleep while drunk on a beach. Missing a day of work, he showed up for the following shift with a raw, red, blistered face and was sacked. After another full year of drinking, he returned to London and the water's edge. The staff had changed, allowing him re-employment. On New Year's Eve, his friend Miguel drove to a garage for smokes. They were pulled over by police, and the driver was detained for being intoxicated. Tom waited in the car, but the heavy rain didn't subside. Despite having narcotic pills concealed in a plastic Ziploc bag in one of his socks, Tom took a taxi to the Uxbridge police station so he could rescue his friend. The station was a hulking fortress with a temporary reception booth erected outside for the New Year's celebration. "Where can I find a mate who's been done for drink driving?" Tom asked the woman in reception. "My son was killed by a drunk driver. I can't help you." The rain hardened. With limited visibility, Tom lined his wet body against a wall, army rolling in, when a patrol car departed open gates. Peering inside a window, he saw Miguel being questioned and banged on the glass, yelling. An officer recognized him from earlier and walked outside, twisting his arm behind his back. On release, Tom turned and with smug restraint swiped the bobby's head. The officer laughed. "Get lost," he said, and scampered inside to dry off. The drinking began to hurt both mentally and physically. Keen to abandon his habit, Tom took a job as a chef at a health club. The bartender, Pete, was a contradiction to the health enthused who attended the establishment. His liver so poisoned, his skin would turn yellow in withdrawal. Each shift, he poured ready-to-drink premixers into a glass, added blackcurrant, and without payment, served Tom, who couldn't say no. For over a year, Tom had a couple of free pints waiting when he clocked off. One evening, the pair convinced the guard to allow them to lock up, and they drank until 4 a.m., taking a bottle of Pimm's for the road. Both their bodies riddled with various substances. Pete found a tree branch and held it above his head as if he was a deer, standing on the road, taunting drivers. When police showed up accompanied by a dog, Tom hid in a bush, unable to access the Pimm's, becoming impatient. He looped around, made his way to the scene, and asked the police what was going on. "That's him," said an officer. "That's the mate who ran off." "What are you talking about? I'm on my way home from a meal." Tom's name was taken and identification found, suggesting they both worked at the health club. The police found the Pimm's and a shot dispenser in his bag and threatened to call his employer. Tom assumed they were bluffing. He was fired the following morning. His next job was as a kitchen hand at the White Bear in Ruislip, where he found romance with Margot, a barmaid. An overdose of prescription drugs and ecstasy saw Tom taking her to Hillingdon Hospital, where he spent the night by her side on a chair. "The bastard beat me up," she told pub regulars. "That's why I was in A&E." Taken outside by the nape of his jacket, the kitchen hand insisted he hadn't touched her and pleaded they don't bash him. Margot informed Tom she left him for another. Heartbroken, prior to 10 a.m., he walked to a nearby pub and waited for it to open. "Whiskey, please." "We're not supposed to serve alcohol till 11 a.m., said an elderly barman who recognized pain and served him a double. Drinks kept coming. At midday, Tom staggered out of the bar. Unable to stand, he leaned upon a fence and thought to himself, "When Margot drives past, I can stop her or throw myself under the wheels." A young man and his girlfriend from the nearby council estate walked by. Tom lifted his eyebrows and grinned, seeking communication as broken-hearted drunks do. 2 minutes later, a blunt object thumped his head, knocking him backwards into a flower garden. Having been bottled by the man who just strode past, Tom saw stars and broke out in laughter, acknowledging the unprovoked attack was not the worst occurrence of the day. Head bleeding, he declined recommendations from passers-by to go to the hospital across the road. At 25, to break his habit, Tom enrolled in a university access course. He came across Gav, a big drinker like him, and the pair twisted each other's arms to indulge. "We suffer together, it's okay." A legless Tom sang karaoke and professed his love to a barmaid. That night, he spent his weekly student allowance on taxis and booze. Strung out and fearful of not making the grade to enter university, Tom sought a GP for advice. Sweating and shaking, he declared his dependency on alcohol to the doctor. "Oh, you're not an alcoholic," she said, handing out some leaflets for moral support before sending him on his way. Initially feeling let down by her denial, over a short glass of whiskey, Tom questioned whether he was an alcoholic or not. "Another, please." Qualifying for university at Roehampton, Tom spent 3 years studying creative writing and journalism. One night, he locked himself out while drunk and naked, using a fire extinguisher sticker to try to hide his privates before being taunted by the security officer. "Sausages, boy. Who wants sausages?" the officer asked his German shepherd. Following a night on the lash, Tom approached a homeless man selling big-issue magazines. "Let me have a try," the student said. "Best of the British to you," the man winked. Big issue," he announced to people passing by Victoria Station. After 15 minutes, hundreds passed without acknowledgement. "Not so easy, is it?" "Hang on a minute, mate." Tom returned from a kiosk with a cup of coffee and a sandwich. "Cheers," the homeless man said, taking back his magazines. He chucked the full polystyrene cup in the bin and peeled the plastic from the triangular sandwich box. Tom heard the opening of a can and turned to see the rough sleeper washing his meal down with cider. Later, he encountered 2 homeless guys crouching in the gutter asking for change. "I need food. I'm hungry," Tom said, having joined. "Stop taking the piss, you wanker. Get off our patch." Tom received news that his dad had had a heart attack and died. He flew to New Zealand. Before giving his eulogy, he polished off the contents of a whiskey flask in a toilet stall. After a heavy week of drinking with his brothers, the hungover man had a rough flight back to England. He drank, studied, and not without massive anxiety, graduated. Now educated and with a healthy bank account due to inheritance, Tom moved back to New Zealand, renting an apartment in Auckland's exclusive Viaduct Basin with his brother. In a close-quartered area, at 3 a.m., Tom asked his brother and the married woman he was with to put the music down and respect the neighbors. She turned it up. "You should be at home with your husband." "Get the fuck out, man," his brother yelled. Making the transition to a hotel and a Herne Bay apartment, without vacuum, Tom allowed grease, mud, cooking oil, crumbs, spilled drink, and cigarette ash to fuse and rise on his floor, where he'd lie drunk and watch infomercials into the early hours. An insect bit him on the thigh, causing infection. Spending his evenings drinking margarita cocktails at a bar across the road, he disturbed others by showing his Lysian. Tired of the question, "What do you do?" instead of giving the direct answer, "I drink," Tom said he worked for the government and couldn't go into detail for the sake of risking national security. Passing out on Cointreau and tequila, Tom left his laptop somewhere. Paranoid and ill, he couldn't bring himself to ask around. Online bank statements reminded him where he'd been. The device was handed in at a Mexican-themed bar. He went down to the establishment and collected his laptop. "You were really pissed last night," the owner said. "You always are. Maybe it's time you quit drinking." Tom took a flight to Spain, where his mother now lived. €7 bottles of brandy and €2 for a packet of smokes kept Tom worry-free. Why should I quit when the product is such great value for money? In the small tourist town of Moirera, bars serve generous spirit measures, and the more one shows up, the stronger the pour. Tom attempted to keep a low profile as barfly rather than regular, though drew attention to himself when he passed out on a bar stool and landed on his melon. "Tom go kaput," the landlord said to the drinker and his mother the following morning. He slipped from a stool in another pub, cutting his head. A young Spaniard collected him from the floor and suggested Tom get medical treatment. "We can get the right medicine in a different bar," the wounded man said, and the pair continued into the night. Out with his mum the next evening, they were waited on by the Spaniard, who spoke of events that Tom could not recall. Unfamiliar faces greeted him in the street. "Great night. Thanks for all those shots, man." Empty pockets explained disappearing inheritance. Early morning, Tom drank spirits in his room before joining his mother. "So hot, Mum. Excited for my first beer of the day." Sneaking out in the evening to discard bottles and cans to bins outside, Tom noticed he had left a large vomit patch on the road close to his house. He soaked the remnants with water and brushed. The nights consisted of brothels, private transportation, and vanishing funds. One morning, Tom was woken up by his mother, with a cut eyebrow and chunk missing from his nose, where he had face planted on the front step. "What's going on, son?" "I've got it under control." A compromise of low percentage lager under his mother's supervision didn't work, so Tom made a plan to sober up elsewhere. He took a flight to Dublin. The plan failed. London bound, 2 weeks later, Tom was in a Willesden Green doss house, where shouts, screams, and smashing glass kept him awake through the night. At a bed and breakfast in Chelmsford, Tom drank lager in his room. Essex suited him, and he spent the last of his inheritance on a 6-month rent advance plus bond. The suds at the bottom of pint glasses reminded the now broke man that for more drink, he'd need a job. Travelling to an interview at one of Marco Pierre White's restaurants in Chelsea, he sipped on vodka, had his application rejected, and crossed the street to the nearest pub, swapping paper for piss. Applying for work as a courier driver, Tom finished 4 pints prior to the interview and was given the job. He managed his booze intake, drinking a couple at shift's end, waking sober. The global financial crisis hit. Petrol prices rose and work dried up. Short trips through condensed London traffic at 50 pence per mile frustrated Tom, who was losing money despite up to 70 hours of weekly driving. RAF bases, Canary Wharf banks, private mansions, council estates, lawyers' offices, Tom faced both joy and anxiety. Transporting a dialysis machine from London to Manchester, he parked the car and began to perspire and tremble. I can't go in. I need a drink. What if someone dies? I can't dump my vehicle because it's tracked. I'll be arrested. I'll be fired. Someone's waiting for that machine. It's a matter of life and death, and the media will put my image all over the place as a killer. Waiting outside Royal London Hospital, while a deceased patient's kidneys were removed, Tom's anxiety grew.